We will talk English this episode.
Exactly, and why is that?
Why is that? Because we have a guest here.
Exactly, we have Woody Zuill with us. Zuill, I don't know if I'm saying
You're very close.
Thank you. And also known as Mr. No Estimates, or the founder and the idea of mob programming. Very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So shall we get started with... Do you want to say something about your background?
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, I got interested in programming in the early 1980s because I wanted to have some software, and I bought some software, and it wasn't very good. So I thought, well, I could write not very good software, so why should I buy that? And I actually found it was quite easy to do the things I wanted to do. So that really piqued my interest. You know, if you have an early success, then you want to do more of it. So it's got more and more interesting to me.
What kind of environment, I want to say this in like for my inner eye, what kind of environment were you sitting at?
So when I first started programming, I owned a little company, and what I was definitely solo programming, and the computer was one of these. It was an Osborne, which they had a tiny little screen and almost no memory. So you sit there with your face stuck in the computer all night long writing software. But I was going to use this software, and I did use it for this business that I owned, which was a small manufacturing graphics and signage company.
Okay.
And the programming, I was very interested in the signage and the art of it and the craft of it, but the programming just became more and more interesting and eventually took over my interest. So about 15 years later, I started working for other people doing software, got out of the business in the late 90s. So I switched to software development.
Okay.
And that was in San Diego, where you lived?
In San Diego. Yeah. So actually I've lived most of my life, really all of my life, in the San Diego area.
Okay.
So that's where I come from. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area to live in, and plenty of great outdoor stuff to do. And so you always have that trade-off. Do I want to sit in here programming or go out and do something fun? So programming is a very interesting thing. It always got my attention.
And so actually I've been doing programming at least a little bit for the last 35 years.
Yes.
In a row, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot of experience.
So yeah, and I'll say this really... I think for everybody out there who wants to learn to program, you only need to learn a few things for it to be useful to you. So, and then once you do that, you just take baby steps, making it more and more useful. Yeah. It's not as hard as it seems. That doesn't mean you can become a great programmer necessarily. I'm just an average programmer. But I
with 35 years of experience.
Right, so. and I've gotten to write a lot of code. Yeah. So I've gotten to see a lot of bad code, but also a lot of bad working environments and a lot of bad practices, along with really good working environments and really good practices. And I hope I've written some good code along the way.
Yeah, because somewhere in this journey, you also started to work more with the way of working rather than writing the code, right?
So you really hit the nail on the head. Do you use that saying in Sweden?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because somewhere around 1999, I worked at a place where, so when I started doing contract work in other companies, I worked at a place which I would say was as nearly ideal as you could get. It was a very, very small shop, and they were doing a lot of things that in a few years from then, you would notice and call Agile. But at that time, they didn't have this Agile terminology.
2 years before.
So it's like just a little bit before the manifesto. Yeah. But this fellow that I was working for had a real good understanding of these things. He's a brilliant programmer. And so I got to see things working really effectively. Meeting frequently with the customer, focused on the customer, focused on making it easy for everyone to excel in their work, taking baby steps, delivering software really frequently, not even every 2 weeks, but every day, every few days, something was ready to look at and use. So all the things that later we would talk about as being agile, they were already doing these things. That was a short contract. I was there 3 months. And then I went to another contract where it was completely the opposite. It was a big place, and the processes were too difficult to work with, and they made me pretty much feel depressed. And everyone I worked with kind of seemed depressed. And as a matter of fact, not to go too far on this, but it was mostly people that were a great deal younger than me. So a lot of them were almost maybe about half my age, and I could see young people should be happy and enjoying their first big job and stuff, and these people are not enjoying it. So I could tell we got to improve this. Now, I'd been self-employed and with employees of my own companies for many years, and I started noticing that the things the bosses in this company were doing were some of the same things I would have done when I was a boss. And now I was just, I should say, I was an employee under these bosses that reminded me a lot of the way I used to be, and I hated it. So then I realized I must have been a terrible boss. So then I had to think, well, what am I going to do with that information? Now, I'd already been trying to become a better boss in the last few years of having my own business, but that's when I really started focusing on it. The difference between those two companies told me there is a better way. We don't need to be so stuck in these worst things.
Okay.
So there you go. Yeah.
Of course, it's the mob programming and the no estimates.
Yes.
How did you find these tools, and how did them start? And how did they start?
So mob programming, really simply, is just it emerged from a team that was attempting to learn how to work well together. So if we start there, during the time between this, when I said 1999, and somewhere around 2009, I had been focusing a lot on finding ways to improve our practices. And somewhere along the way it dawned on me that it's not about the practices themselves. It's about having a way to assess practices, to say, could this be good or not? Yeah. And so if you try a practice and it doesn't seem to really work, you have to be able to evaluate that.
Yes.
What's wrong with it? Do we need to change? Should we be doing this? So I've been trying all sorts of things. Somewhere around 2000, I had been introduced to pair programming. And pair programming is essentially, for those who don't know what it is two computer programmers sitting at a desk at a single computer. They'll talk about what they're going to work on, and then they're going to do it.
Yes.
But what often would happen, it would kind of regress, I don't know if that's the right word, but it would turn into, instead of two programmers working together, is one programmer working and the other one watching them work. And so I call this driver observer. So there's somebody at the keyboard, they're kind of driving, and the other person's just sitting there watching. And that's not necessarily an effective way to do mob program or pair programming. So along the way, I heard of the idea of driver navigator. And in driver navigator, the navigator is keeping their eyes on where we're going, and the driver is keeping us going quickly based on the directions that are being given by the navigator. So an easy example would be if we're going to look for people who have had a late payment on their credit card and we need to send them a notice, then the navigator might say, that's what we need to do, and then say, well, the first thing, let's get a collection of people who have had a late payment in the last 6 months. And then, so the driver could start coding that while the navigator's thinking about, now how are we going to check the rules? So now we've got this, these people who have had a late payment. Now do we know when do we want to send them a notice, and how are we going to send them a notice? So we've broken the programming role into two people so we can share the burden. One's focused on the details right now, the other's focused on the next step we're going to take. So once I learned that, and I learned that from Llewellyn Falco. If you ever get a chance to interview Llewellyn, you should. This is a warning I will give everybody in your podcast. Don't take your friends to conferences. I took Llewellyn to a conference. He fell in love with someone there and ended up moving to Finland because of it. So just a warning.
He's quite close.
Because he used to live just 20 miles from where I live. And now he lives thousands of miles away.
But closer to us.
Very close to you, so it's convenient for you.
We have to go to Åland sometime and interview Agile Åland, so maybe we should take Finland on the same trip then.
So I learned this from him. He told me this kind of pair programming works best if we follow this simple guideline. If you have the idea, then you aren't at the keyboard. So that means when you have the idea, you give up the keyboard to the other person. And he puts it this way. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. So if you use that simple guideline, it doesn't have to be a rule. That means we're going to have a much purer concept of driver navigator. And so if the person at the keyboard goes, oh, I know what to do next, then they simply step away from the keyboard, the other person takes the keyboard, and the driver becomes the navigator becomes the driver. So interestingly, once I started doing that,
Still in pairs.
With pair programming. And that was, that was 2007 or 8, I think. But that kind of made it a lot easier to do very useful pair programming. I started then working with testers and product owners and others than just developers. Because now I could sit at the keyboard and they could tell me what they want. And they could be the navigator and I could just be coding it right there with them in real time.
Yes.
So then in 2011, I was bringing these ideas to a company in San Marcos, which is near San Diego in California. And we were trying to learn how to work well together. And they were starting to learn some of these techniques of pair programming that I had learned. And one day, we needed to get together in a room to look at some code that somebody was having trouble with. And as we started looking at it, someone started navigating us through this code. In other words, we looked at the code and we could see some problems, like a very long method. A long method is a code smell. If you have to scroll through a method, it's too long. So the person stood up and started navigating the person at the keyboard. We call this, and I think it's Arlo Belshi coined this term, read by refactoring. If you don't understand the code and it's hard to read it, just start refactoring it. You'll get an understanding of it really quickly. So this was something we'd been learning to do. They started guiding through the refactoring. And after a few moments of doing that, someone else chimed in and said, oh, wait, maybe we'll need to reverse that and try this instead. So we started collaborating, and the whole team became the navigators, and the person at the keyboard was just simply following their instructions. This can lead to chaos if we're not careful. Because too many people talking. It's like if somebody's sitting in the back seat of the car, somebody's sitting in the front seat of the car, the person in the front seat's talking to the driver and says, looking at the map, says, let's turn to the next right turn. It's about 3 blocks up. Turn right there. And the person in the back seat, when we get there, goes, no, not right, turn left. Well, all of a sudden the driver doesn't know what to do. So we have to be really careful not to make it a noisy environment where we're cautious about giving just the right amount of instruction. But at the end of the day, we'd only worked that way for a few hours. We noticed how good it was. We were doing an end-of-the-day retrospective every day. We would stand up and say, what went well today? And then we'd ask ourselves, well, how can we turn that up for tomorrow? How do you turn up the good of today, tomorrow? And in this case, it was simply, let's do more of this tomorrow.
And that day, it was the very first mob that was formed.
That was what we could call a first of it.
Yeah. How many people was it in that group?
I think there were 6.
6.
Yeah. And actually, at the end of that day, everybody noticed 4 things. First of all, that we had learned a lot. So that's a powerful part of mob programming, is there's a lot of learning going on. If it's not my specialty of what we're coding right now, I'm going to learn a little bit more about how my specialty, my expertise, fits in with that expertise. So if we're doing something with the UI, and I'm, let's say, a back-end programmer, I'll learn better how a UI person thinks and how they would use what I would do. And then when we were doing the back-end thing, the reverse would be happening, right? So we were seeing more about how each other worked, and we were learning more than that. But another thing we noticed was we actually got a lot done. That's a big surprise, because with 4 or 5 people, 6 people together, you would think they'd be getting less done. But we got a lot more done. We noticed that our quality was quite high. With 4, 5, 6 pairs of eyes on the code, everybody's paying attention to that. Matter of fact, if you do something that's not quite up to the quality that somebody else could guide you to do, you'll raise your own quality. And pretty soon, we're getting the best of everybody into everything we're doing. 2 more things we noticed, though. One was it was lots of fun, and also it didn't wear us out. In other words, when you're sharing the work, it's a lighter load. And yet, so we're getting more done, better quality, it's fun, and we're not wearing ourselves out. We wanted more of that.
And which year did you say that this was?
That was 2011.
2011. Okay.
Yeah, so that's 7 years ago almost. 6.5 years. Yeah. So, and they've continued to work that way. I stayed there for another 3.5 years. And then I started getting so much demand to speak at conferences about that, I had to make a judgment call. And my goal in the first place was to work with this team just long enough for them to know the best of what I know, and then they wouldn't need me anymore. But it became too much fun, and I ended up staying longer probably than I should have. So I was there for 4 years, but so many people were asking about this, I thought it's time for me to go. And my first invitation to come to Europe was to come to Sweden, and I started sharing it here. So that was really 6.5 years ago, and they continue to work this way there now. We started with the 1 team, and I think they have 8 teams now.
Cool.
All doing mob.
All doing mob programming. So the company itself is a rather large company, 2,500 people. That's not large, but 2,500 people. But it's not all. It's not software. It's a manufacturing firm.
Okay.
So
So they have an IT department.
and they have an
of
IT department with quite a bit of software development. Exactly.
And I told you before also, but I have 2 teams or.
Oh yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I have. It's 25 people in that group that is doing one application.
Yes.
And they are doing it in 2 mobs. So they have different roles. Of course, one is product owner,
Right.
And then they have different specialties. One is more in automating tests, and one is more into like helping out with requirements. Also, and also then back end and front end. And it's a big application, complex application. And one of the problems I noticed when I started was that the knowledge transfer was very low, and we were very dependent on each person. So if one were sick, we couldn't do anything in that area, and then block the other developers. So it was like 25 different teams, because every person were a team, kind of, within the team.
That's a brilliant insight.
Yeah. So, but then I know that at the company we worked, there were another team doing mob programming. So I invited them, and they had a talk for like 45 minutes, just saying, okay, this is what we do, and this is our idea, and this is the benefits we see from it. And then like 1 week after they started with 2 mobs then, and they are still doing it today. And this was like, was it 3 months ago now? 2 months ago?
Excellent.
So they're doing it now between 9 and 11 in the mornings, and then they have a break between 11 and 1, and then from 1 to 3 they do it again, and then they do all the meetings before or within the breaks. And the fun thing is that I asked a developer just last week, I think it was, about how much code do they actually get out now, comparing on coding individually, and he actually said that they already now feel that they are getting out more code, not only high quality but also more code than before. And also, like you said, the quality is increasing, and also the knowledge is increasing already after this short period of time. So now they are really requesting to, okay, can we buy a big screen now and just doing this only fixed mob stations. Yeah.
So we had started with projectors. But I think a good high-quality large monitor is way big improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, today.
Because if you get them in 4K and everything.
They're so much better, and they're not that expensive. No. They last a long time.
Yeah.
And they make it easier on your eyes.
Yes.
Matter of fact, you have to really watch out for the ergonomics when doing mob programming, because when you work alone, you set everything up for your own comfort.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you work with a team, you just take whatever comes. So if you're in a conference room, you're sitting around a table, that's not an ideal setup, because everybody's neck is turned all day, so they start getting a sore neck, or their back hurts them.
Yeah.
And we're sitting in chairs sometimes that aren't meant for all day work.
Yeah.
So we'll fatigue ourselves. We have to pay attention to that.
What's your solution? What's the ideal the mob environment?
So, ideally, we need to have as fast as possible computer. So as many processors as possible, as much fast memory, like an array of disk drives. You want speed, so that doesn't get in our way. Then once we have that, the setup needs to be comfortable for each person.
Yeah.
Because what I've seen in a lot of places is like the chairs like we're sitting in right now are typical kitchen chairs.
Yes.
They're sort of made for the average person, but the average person doesn't exist.
No.
Right? Like,
well, maybe, but
we could be
one of them,
we could be the exact same height, and our arms are going to be a little longer or shorter. Or one person's legs are going to be longer than the others, even though they stand at the exact same height. So the same chair doesn't work for. There's no real average person that chair really was made for. It was made for a conglomerate person that doesn't exist. So having really comfortable chairs is important. Having yourself sitting so that you are not needing to turn your neck to see the screen.
Okay, so sitting in a circle or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can also rotate, which is good.
Rather.
So always you can move.
Rotates.
Yeah. So actually, so our practice of mob programming, we would use what you could call a rotation. One person always at the keyboard, but that person moves off the keyboard, and someone else takes their place frequently. In our model, we would change every 5 to 10 minutes the person at the keyboard.
Did you use an alarm clock for that?
We use so at first we would just use our phone, which the phone has this built-in timers.
Yes.
It makes a sound, so when that goes off, we move. But we noticed we would ignore that after a while. Okay. And so we're talking and whatever, we're too deep in what we're doing, and then it goes off. So we got a much louder timer.
Okay.
But that still we would ignore that.
So now you wrote a program or something.
Yeah, and so actually what happened was one of the team members noticed this was annoying everybody else in our area. And he came over one day and said, like the other programmers that weren't mob programming with us. And somebody heard the alarm go off and said, well, is the servers crashing or what's going on, And he came running over and said, this is annoying everybody. And he actually went to his work area and worked alone, came back in a few minutes, a half hour, whatever, with a timer that would blank out the screen.
Yeah.
So then you don't have to have a sound. Now there's at least 10 or 20 people who have written similar mob timers.
Yes, yeah.
And that's okay because it's good exercise just to write one of those, and then you can customize it for yourself. I would like to suggest though that if you try one of the ones that you can just get from because they're all open source or a lot of them, try that for a few sessions and see if it works. And then if you want to write your own, that's not a bad idea. Yeah.
What about this question of because I think that's a hot topic as well, breaks or time, because like in Eric's setup they do it 4 hours per day then, so basically half of the day. But in your setup you sort of recommend that you do it all of the day.
Well, we were doing it all the day. I try not to make recommendations.
But you did. And did you get tired and worn out completely because it's so intense, or did you take a lot of breaks, or how did you go about that?
So that's an excellent question, because we didn't get a lot of fatigue from this, because I think that we had been practicing using a coding dojo style. We've been practicing working together for 5 months before we started before we knew we were going to do mob programming. So we were already gotten good at letting people share their idea and then trying their idea. And I think a lot of the fatigue comes from thinking too much, trying to think too much about what we're doing and not focusing on your own personal health. So our rule, and I would say this is close to a rule as we have, is that you have to pay attention to your own personal health and sanity. So if you need to take a break at any time, you just go take a break. You don't have to wait to a specific time to go get a drink, to go use the restroom, to go take a walk if you want, or if you want to go work alone. There was no rule that you should come and always sit with the team.
So people go in and out?
People come in and out. Okay. So there's a 3-minute video you can see that we filmed ourselves working for a whole day, available on YouTube. It shows us working for a full day, but it's time lapse, so it only takes 3 minutes to see the whole video. And when you watch that video, you'll see people coming and going all the time. They're standing up, sitting down, moving around. And now in that same work environment, we have standing tables, so you can lower or raise the table to your own preferred height. So it's a very active environment. I would say it's critical that the individuals understand they have to watch out for their own personal health. So like we had a team member join us, and we noticed after a few weeks he was dozing off because he was too tired. And that's when we discovered that if you try to pay attention too intently all day long, you're going to wear yourself out.
Completely.
And so if you do that day after day, you will get fatigued. And so that fatigue builds up. And so then we had to talk with him about, well, none of us really try to know everything. It's all interesting, but to stay focused on your own specialty and learn bits and pieces about everything else. This is the rule. Or I don't want to use the rule. The guideline we use. It would be like this. You contribute when your contribution is meaningful, and you want to give your best contribution at just the right time and in just the right way. If you do that, that means that you're waiting to see when you think your contribution really will bring value, and that it doesn't block the flow of what other people are doing. And it looks like right now is a good time, you share it. And then you do it in the right way, which means you're not overly insistent. You're not insisting that my way is the right way. It's just that here's the way I think we should try. Now it's for the team to decide. Don't get a hurt feeling if somebody says, I've got a better idea. Then we can share both ideas, and we can try both ideas. And then, by trying both ideas, 2 things might happen. We might find one or the other doesn't work, and we might find they both work. So now, and we could also find neither of them works.
Of course.
So we now need to talk a little more. Which did we like the best? Which one should we continue using for now? Or the most wonderful thing is, I've got an even better idea now. And we don't get the better idea without trying. We don't get the better ideas by just talking. Matter of fact, talking often is an issue in software development because it blocks us from the experiment that we should be doing instead. And that's why
too much discussion, too little trying.
Exactly. And so my wife, who's an artist, if you watch her work in her art, she will do 100 drawings before she even gets the idea of the piece she wants to work on right now. And after she gets that, she's going to go through a bunch more drawings, refining till she gets the idea enough where she wants it to be to try the final work. So this is a lot of winnowing. We're going to see the ideas, try the ideas, learn from the ideas. That's where we get our best results. And there's a lot more to it than that. But
of course.
There we go. So that's how a lot of people ask, well, how do you deal with conflicts on the team? We just have to realize that it's never a conflict of personalities. It should be only we have conflicting ideas. My idea is enough different from yours that maybe we're looking at it from two different points of view. Let's try them both, see what we learn.
Yep, good point.
So I would like to ask that of you, Eric, in your team. So do you see conflicts come up, and how do you deal with them?
Most likely, yes. I'm not sitting in the mob team all the time, unfortunately. I wish I had the time to do that. So I don't know yet. I think as for now, since it's so new, I think they are quite eager to learn. So right now they are quite positive to the way of working. I think over time it will be more conflicts and problems maybe. But also back to your question there with programming all day, mob programming all day. I think that right now it's not possible to do more than 4 hours because we have a meeting culture. Where we have a lot of meetings that we would like to remove as well. But then we need to find another ways of doing that communication. And I tried to convince Woody and Dick here before we started that we should create no meeting, #no meetings.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are already convinced, I think.
Okay. So we will try that.
So this is the thing, when you notice a practice that you like, that you think is bringing value, and meetings would be a good point. So my friend Kevin Meadows has this idea. If we use the concept of turning up the good on anything that we do, and turning up the good usually means we want more of it. So if we use that same logic with meetings, we would say if meetings are good, how do we turn up the good on them? One way would be to have more meetings. Pretty soon I think we would see more meetings means less things are getting done. So it's hard to turn up the good on the meetings by saying we want more meetings. So what we found with mob programming, which you could think is, well, you're just meeting all day, but actually not. So meetings often are where we share some information, make some decisions, then make some assignments so people can go and do the actual work. So in this case, we are still talking about what do we want to do, but instead of assigning it to someone, we just do it. So I think turning up the good on having instant trying of our ideas was a big part of what mob programming was. So if we could turn up the good on meetings, how would we do that? Should turning up the good on meetings making them shorter and more frequent? Making them very focused? What kind of things could we do to turn up the good on meetings and see if we can get more value out of them? But I think it's like with so many other things, and the no estimates thing we mentioned earlier, is that sometimes getting more of something doesn't work, and trying to do them better doesn't work.
Just remove them instead.
And maybe removing them can work. And there's lots of examples of that in real life. And a good example for me is when I'm on these trips, everybody offers me sweet candies, desserts, and so on. So I eat too much.
Easily, yes.
And I gain weight. So is there a way for me to eat the sweets and not gain weight? There actually isn't. So what do you do? What's that?
No, not really.
Yeah, so I mean, your choice is to eat fewer of those sweets or walk more.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have a lot of choice. You can't chew the candy slower, and then it will give you fewer calories. Because it's still giving you can't swallow it whole. What can you do with it? So there's no way to really. This is what the no kind of idea is. So if I drink a soft drink and it has no sugar in it, I'm going to drink, a zero cola or whatever. That's the way to turn up the good. But I don't like the taste of those very much, so I drink more water.
Yes.
So sometimes doing away with the thing gives me the benefit I want, which is to try and keep myself in good enough shape to continue going tomorrow.
Yes.
So,
But also, I mean, if you really quit with something, for example, meetings, then you will also notice what do we actually miss.
what do we miss from it?
Exactly.
Yes,
and,
right.
and that will be much more easier than sitting and having them and guess what
Yes,
you will miss.
of course.
So that's the experiment. Yeah.
Listen now carefully, everyone. I declare hereby that in my organization I will try no meetings a week at least to see what happens, and then I will talk about that here
And
in the pod.
I will of course join that.
Yeah.
And you have enough listeners to hold you to it.
Yeah, there are some tens of thousands or something, so we
That's
will
no
now be
problem.
Yeah, so this is
accountable for this.
you make a declaration in public, you got to
Yes.
do it.
Yeah. And your organization is also listening to this podcast, so they.
Oh no, they are forewarned.
And remember where you heard it first. It was Agilpodden, and this was Erik's idea. #no meetings.
So I got to warn you though, there is nothing new under the sun, right? So whenever I talk about mob programming, invariably someone will come up and say, "We've done that before," and that's so. If you start talking about no meetings, somebody's going to come up and tell you, "We've done that before."
Yes, yeah, of course.
So you'll hear it, you know.
Yeah.
True.
So what would we like to discover next?
Shall we move to the estimates?
Yeah, we probably should.
You have a project, you have this idea, you have a business case, and you can earn this amount of money from the idea. So you ask, the high management team asks, what will this cost to develop this? It's very important that we find out what it will cost, and someone is planning it and comes up with the answer, and there is a project definition or something like that. We all know this scenario. And what's your answer to this?
Yeah, so this is the common need for estimates. There are other needs for estimates. For example, a team that's following a sprint style, scrum style methodology, they want to know how much should we work on for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They used to say until very recently, how much will we commit to getting done in the next 2 weeks?
still
I think
say
everybody's sort of noticing that commitment is sometimes dysfunctional. So, but we want these estimates for various reasons. Some people say, well, that way we can tell, is our velocity where it should be, and can we increase our velocity? And I think that all these things are potentially helpful, but they're also they have traps. They're potentially harmful.
Yes.
So we need to be really mindful. So I don't have an answer, because I think the estimates themselves aren't the problem. The problem is that we think that our decision-making process needs estimates to be able to make decisions, and that means the kinds of decisions we make rely on estimates.
Yes.
So we really have to change that thinking for starters,
Yes.
to even consider not doing estimates. And that's very difficult, because most people feel that an estimate will help them make a decision.
And it does, because they take a decision. But what we have to add here is that so the decision process is actually relying on false information, basically, or
Well, you put that very
useless
boldly.
information.
Yeah, that's very bold, but I agree with you, because I think that information is at best misdirecting us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I read before here a little bit on the internet,
Good.
and I have found this wonderful chess metaphor that I immediately fell in love with, and I'm sure I will use it from time to time. But do you want to say it yourself?
Okay, so
for
I
the
think
listeners.
that may have been one of the first blog posts I wrote on this idea. And I only wrote a few, because this is something that's of great interest to me. But first of all, I'm not a very good writer. And mostly in those days when I was writing blog posts, it was to help me think through something. Nobody was reading my blog. I still don't think many people read my blog. I haven't written much there for months, or actually years. I don't put much there. So this was my thinking. When we are estimating software, one way to think of it is like estimating a game of chess.
Yes.
So we're not going to just estimate how long the chess game will take, but let's estimate how many moves it will take, because that's part of what we do in the software development. Let's estimate where the pieces will be when the game ends. Can we estimate any of that? And I would say there's so many variabilities that we could only at best get some kind of approximation of any of that information. Now, I know if I'm playing somebody much better than me, I can estimate they'll beat me, and I can estimate
Yes.
that they'll beat me really quickly.
Maybe,
but I still
yes.
can't know how many seconds. So if it was really important to know the seconds or the number of minutes, my information would be useless. I could keep records of every chess game I've ever played, and that will still be different with each person I played chess with.
Yes.
So go ahead. You have a question you want to ask.
No.
Okay, so if software is anything like that, and I believe it is because software has many variabilities, chess only has a board with, 64 squares?
Yes.
And how many pieces on a chessboard?
16.
16 per side.
Per side, exactly. 32.
And so the variabilities here are those pieces move in extremely limited ways.
Yes.
They're very
Simple
predictable,
rules.
simple rules, and yet we can end up with thousands of combinations. I have like 20 chess books at home. I've never been very good at playing chess, but I've loved playing chess when I was younger. So I bought books and learned about it. Every chess master knows dozens of possible openings.
Yes.
And it's all very well defined, and still you will very rarely see the exact same game played twice. So with software, the problem is our variability is much, much greater.
Even,
And
yes.
the value of estimating in chess is nothing, except for if somebody wants to bet on the game, how many moves it's going to take. You might probably need to make a pretty good guess. But with software, we think we need to know this so we can make decisions about should we fund this project or not.
Yes.
And I think that is what is misleading us, is that we think that's the only way you can do business. One thing I often hear is people saying, well, we only have, let's just make up a number, $5 million. And so people in the company have proposed these different projects, and we want to divvy that money up. We know we can only do one or two large projects, and with what we have left over, we can do a smaller project. Well, first of all, that seems silly to me, that we're going to use the money we have and fit in something just because we have some leftover money. That kind of seems foolish. But so we want to make this decision because we have this much money. So that's a starting point. Why is that a reasonable way to run business? Most people will tell me that's because how business is done. Well, that's like the most odd way to answer. That's a circular reasoning.
Yes.
We have to do business this way because that's how business is done, because we have to do business this way. So that doesn't seem to be reasonable to me. So my first experience was not in software. I had a little manufacturing company I mentioned, and I had a customer come to me and they needed an estimate for some work. And I looked at this work, but they were under an emergency. They needed to get this work done on an extremely tight deadline. They had already gone to every other vendor they could go to. I was not one of their vendors, but several of their other vendors had said, maybe you should go talk to this guy because he kind of can take on these kinds of difficult challenges because nobody else could get it done in time. They called me. I looked at their work and I said, and they wanted an estimate. And I said, so this was a Friday afternoon. They needed the work done by Monday.
Oops.
So that means somebody's got to work all weekend. There's no magic time to slot in there.
No, obviously
so
not.
the first thing I told them was, this is going to be very expensive for me to find the people who can do this work for you. So how am I going to know how much it's going to cost me to get those people in the short amount of time you have to make a decision while we still have time left to do your work? And they said, they were brilliant people. It was a computer company that made memory devices for computers back in the early 90s. And that was near where my shop was. These were smart people, experts on memory management, experts on compressing data and all kinds of stuff. And so they saw the logic real quickly that, And then, so this is way before Agile. And this is what I told them. If you want me to do the work, I will come to your company right away. And in my time driving over there, in those days we actually started having what they used to call car phones. I had a car phone. So when I'm coming over, I'm going to call everybody I know and see if I can get enough people to work on this that we have a chance of getting something done by Monday. They had hundreds of pieces that they needed us to work on. With a variety of shapes and styles. How do you give an estimate for this? I'd never done their sort of work before. I never tried to do it specifically what they were wanting to get done, and I had no idea how much it was going to cost me. So by the time I got there, I just told them, you need to make a decision right now that you can assign somebody to this work, starting right now. From this moment on, they need to meet with me continuously. As I gather together the people to do the work, we're going to start on it right now, as soon as we get back to the shop. And we're going to discover the processes we need to do your work, and you're going to need to approve it as we go. So this is like customer and developers working together throughout the process. We're interfacing with the customer, and we're going to do it iteratively.
Yes.
And we need instant feedback, or we can accomplish nothing. They agreed to do it. We finished this up at the end on Monday. We had the lion's share of their work done because everybody collaborated. Well, this wasn't mob programming, but it was a lot of mob thinking and people working together in teamwork.
Yeah.
At the end of that short period of time, this company said, we get these pretty frequently, and we never know exactly what it's going to be about until just before it happens, because these are prototypes. And they're preparing them with all the technology they can get into it just before a trade show. So they don't know what they're going to have ready to go until the last few minutes. And that's when it dawned on me, I don't want customers who want to get a price. I want customers who have a serious problem to solve. And they actually told me this at the end of it. They said, I don't think there would have been another way to get this done. And I thought, in some ways, we had just invented a process, but as I started studying about it, I found that lots of companies work this way. This is a no estimates way of doing custom manufacturing. That actually worked so well for them, I changed my way of thinking about customers. I started going, what would be ideal for me is to find customers who just have a problem to solve, and they really don't care that the cost of solving it isn't the big part. The solving it is the big part. So software development is very much the same way. And I want to put a point on it. I know you're going to have some questions. This is what I believe is the value of software development. It's not in doing all the work that we think we need to do. In other words, if we want this amount of features, the important thing isn't doing that amount of features. The point is doing just the right features and just enough of each feature so that we can deliver something that the customer wants, and we can discover what they want instead of trying to figure that out ahead of time. So a business, the job of a business is not to have a limited amount of money to spend. The job of the business is to always be making enough money to spend the money they need to make. Do you understand what I'm saying? You need to spend money to make the money. It's not about having a limited amount of money. It's about finding a way to make the income that you need from the money you do spend. That's a slightly different way to look at it. I probably didn't explain it very well, but that's what I started looking for. Let's find a way to get the income coming from the efforts we're making instead of limiting what we're willing to consider doing and then making a choice based on the limited amount of money we have. Let's find a way to monetize sooner and more directly. Now, this was back in the 90s. I didn't invent anything. That's what the people who are now already were doing lean and startups in those days had already figured out. It's just we stumbled on it too.
So you're basically saying that you should, if you have a business, you should monitor how much money are coming in, or how the money are coming in, etc., or is it sort of watching this flow at the same time, and that determines how much money you can actually spend on developing things or whatever you want to do, and then find this as a balance between these two flows.
Yeah. So conceptually, the idea is getting good at experimenting with your concept rapidly and determining, can we start bringing income in, instead of saying in 2 years, if we do everything right, we're going to get this much value. And that's what those meetings you talked about earlier, they say, we know we're going to get this much value, so how much is it going to cost us? Well, guess what? The value was just an estimate anyways. And there's a funny thing that happens. When we estimate value, we usually estimate it higher than it
we overestimate.
And when we estimate cost, we want to push it down.
Of course.
So
that's human.
We're tricking ourselves.
Yes.
So Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, said we have to really be careful not to fool ourselves, because we are the easiest person to fool.
Yes.
And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So let's watch out for that.
So your answer, your suggestion would in software development would sort of be that let's start trying and inspect what we get continuously.
Yeah, which is what Agile is, right? So that's one of the reasons I was attracted to Agile, because that was my experience in the 90s in doing something completely different. And then when I heard people in the late 90s, they were starting to talk about these things. You could read stuff. All these people had these different ideas. The people that ended up grouping together to talk about Agile, they were already doing these things.
Yes.
And that's what they did. They said, okay, let's deliver in small bits. Let's deliver and get rapid feedback.
Yes.
Let's deliver that value to the people who want to use it, so we can learn whether it was worth continuing on that, or should we try something else. And then let's emphasize how good it can be if the business people and the developers work together all the time.
Yes.
And so when we found these things, all they're talking about, the Agile Manifesto and the principles behind it, are really kind of direction. It just says, if we think about our work, like improve the ability for the individuals to excel at their work, and improve the ability for them to have really great interactions, that's interactions, individuals' interactions over processes and tools, then that's what we want. If a tool becomes detrimental to the ability for us to excel, or detrimental to our ability to work well together, then we should scrutinize, should we be using that tool or that practice?
Yes, of course.
And it can go on with delivering working software, responding to change, collaborating with the customer. That's what these things are. That's purely just Agile. And this is an Agile podcast.
Yes, it is.
So it's a good thing we rounded back around to that.
Yeah, but I think, in the Agile Manifesto, or what we're missing is we still have the traditional business steering, or at least our experience.
In many places.
We have that.
In very many
We
places.
have the classic
Definitely,
business.
yes.
And the classic business steering is, like you said, you
want the business case.
Yes, you want the business case, and you also have a budget that you need to spend.
Yes.
And it's not good if you go under, it's not good if you go over.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing, isn't it?
And then you put KPIs on every part of the organization that says, okay, if you do good, then you are on budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're actually, I think, when we do take that kind of approach, we're actually making it harder for people to succeed. And we're using measurements that people will need to learn how to game, if you understand that terminology. So if somebody's got to fit within that range, let's say we were playing the chess game again.
Yeah.
And we knew that if we were that the estimate was that we finish in this exact positions, we're going to drive towards having that. And within this number of moves and within that amount of time, and we'll probably end up losing the game, because the game of chess isn't about ending exactly a certain way. The idea of a game of chess is to getting yourself in a position where you can see a clear path to a win.
Yeah.
And the people who can think forward a number of moves, that usually means they're playing against a very limited opponent. In our world, that opponent is really, can we deliver value soon enough and well enough to grow our company or grow our income, or at least make our company be able to be sustainable. Because the sustainability, I think, is a better thing to go for than the growth itself. Because if we get good at sustainability, I think then it becomes a lot easier to make truly useful and meaningful growth, instead of growth just to keep the company alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do see companies doing that. We need more sales, we need more sales, we need more sales.
Yeah.
And so then we give up. Let's just put it this way. The greed ends up corrupting the company.
Yes.
And that's not infrequently done.
And mixing up the culture and
So it
everything.
mixes up the culture. I read a really great little blog post about a company. I don't know the name of the company. I think they purposefully didn't share it, where they had a terrible version of this. That they had gotten it to the point where almost none of the developers, something like 25 or 30 developers, were there for more than just a year. Because people just would get sick of the place and leave. And so this went on for a very long period of time, spending a lot of money on a failing project. That negative connotations in an environment like that destroys the company, and it corrupts the people that are working in it. The ones who are managing it are just trying to keep the money coming in to pay all these bills and make it look like we're delivering something. That's a fully negative, flawed, and bordering on unethical approach to doing business. I hope none of your listeners are going, but that's how I do business, and now I've offended them. But
but it's okay if you offend them in our podcast.
They're used
we offend
to being
people
a bit
all the time.
offended.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I would say, being ethical is just a step towards having things the way to have the goodness that we could have. So ethical is something that's important to us. At the end of the day, everybody has to maintain their self-esteem.
Yes.
We should never have somebody else pay for our unethical behavior. And so that's what commonly happens. If we are cheating a customer and cheating our employees or cheating our peers and our coworkers by stealing their time and all these things, we need to be aware of that. And it will lead to a better world if we can take these steps to... And so the ethical aspects of it are important.
Yes.
And I've seen many companies that I would say are bordering on being unethical. And I think that that's something we need to pay a lot more attention to.
Yeah.
I think estimates are one of the things when we have a vendor and we have a
supplier.
So we have the supplier and the customer, and then we get an adversarial relationship. And there's a great book, I'm sure most of your listeners would know it, Out of the Crisis, the book from Deming.
No, I haven't.
Well worth reading. Let me make sure, before we're done, I'll make sure I got the name of the book right. So Deming is a very famous systems person who is well known for bringing a lot of this thinking that he had into post-war Japan. And much of what Japan's success for a long time was based on this kind of thinking that we can learn a new way of doing business. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the companies like Toyota and Honda and so on, but it's not just car manufacturers. We're focusing on this idea of what is a different way to do business, a more effective way to do business. So we've kind of veered off no estimates, but if I bring that back to it, so actually, you may have questions to ask.
Yeah, I have two now.
Okay, let's do that instead.
Okay.
Because I've just started going on, and I can do this for hours.
But the fun thing is that you will come back to Sweden.
I will be back to Sweden.
Yeah, then we will do another episode.
Absolutely.
But I have two questions. One is that since you live in that area, have you been visiting like Apple or any cool startups in the Silicon Valley?
Oh, that's a good point. Well, now they're 500 miles away from me, but I have been. So I've gotten to visit a few companies.
Yeah.
And one that I've visited both in San Francisco and in Boston, I think it was Twitter.
Okay, cool.
And I got to do talks on mob programming there. I don't know if they do any or not, but I did a talk there at both locations, and that was pretty nice to see.
Yeah.
And I've given a little training at places like Cisco, but not on mob programming. And so there's a lot of companies there that are, I would say, huge and have a lot of great things going on. And when you go visit them, you're just seeing a little tiny bit of it.
Yeah, of course.
And so, but I have been.
I guess you still can feel the culture and the cool stuff that is happening. And
so it's an interesting thing. The bigger the company, the more variety of culture there usually is.
Of course.
You go into this company, and this every part of the company, and they're doing things one way, and you go to that part of the company, and they're doing things another way. And I've done this. So I've done this same basic mob programming introduction talk at Microsoft. And in talking with the people, I could tell it was very different here than it was over there. Now, some of the places I've been that I've really enjoyed doing some workshops at Pivotal. So Pivotal is one of the companies that's been, instrumental in the cloud world and in the Agile world, and so to see them working is like lots of really focused pair programming going on, and lots of I would think true iterative development, and it's just wonderful to see this stuff. I've visited here in Sweden. I've visited Spotify, and so Spotify is known all over the world.
Yes.
I visited them. I think I've done workshops there 2 or 3 times, but I've also just visited them 2 or 3 times. So I've been there maybe 6 or 7 times, plus over in Göteborg. And please forgive me if I'm saying Göteborg wrong.
That's
fine.
good.
It's close. Okay.
Another question.
Yes.
Have you gone out for a beer with the ones who have wrote the Agile Manifest? Have you met them?
So I've argued with many of them.
Yeah, I can guess that since they live in that kind of area and they are from US, most of them.
So and there's a handful of them that I've gone beyond just saying hi to.
Okay.
But I would say, like right off the bat, every one of them I've met and talked with are very clear thinkers who've really helped me understand the things that I was trying to think about. They've written books and they've shared these things. And so the reason No Estimates kind of turned into something was because a Twitter conversation I was having with Ron Jeffries.
Okay.
And Ron Jeffries is he's a deep thinker. And he's also thinks broadly. He's thinking about all kinds of aspects of things. So he'd asked me one day. I tweeted about. Well, I worked on this project for a while where we did no estimates, And I tried to explain in Twitter, you can't explain very much.
No.
And in those days, it was even less, 140 characters, but you still can't do any better with the whatever. And so I tried to explain in Twitter, and I said, well, look, I'll write a blog post. So I think the second blog post I wrote on the no estimates idea was this introduction to no estimates, where I explained how I couldn't give too many specifics because that would tell who the client was, but how we went from a very troubled situation and very quickly decided not to use estimates to get them out of this situation.
Yeah.
And so that he kind of drove the beginning of that. And when I tweeted about it, I said, basically, here's this example. I wrote a blog point for it. Here's another, I'm throwing more fuel on the fire. And I used the hashtag for the first time of no estimates. Cool. And then it just exploded in flames, which I wasn't exactly expecting, but it's what led me to being invited to come to Sweden in the first place.
Yeah.
Because a fellow, Jakob Wollman, I believe I'm saying his name right, and please forgive me if I'm not, invited me to come speak at Dev down in Malmo, which is a really wonderful big technical conference.
Yeah.
And that led me to meeting many people in Stockholm because they went to the conference
Yeah.
and invited me to come up here to speak. And on that trip, I gave you little talks at Betsson, Nordea Bank, Ericsson, Agile or Aptitude, and others. And so that was like a really rapid introduction for me to the Swedish Agile community. And I actually found that Stockholm, in a way, is, like I said earlier, probably more people per capita doing Agile things than anywhere I've visited. And I've been all over the world now. Australia, Asia, South America. I've been in India. I've been all over the U.S. Stockholm is a cool hotbed.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I didn't think so. But you say that the Agile scene is like hottest in Sweden if you're outside U.S. compared to...
So for me, this was the first place that people really started, Sweden is the first place people really started paying attention to the mob programming, really in the early days. So the first person was Marcus, to write a blog post about it was two fellows, I might get that, Willis Vard and Tobias Anderberg. And they had tried some mob programming, and they did a talk about it at Agile Sverige.
Yes.
And then, and Marcus was there, he heard their talk, and he wrote a blog post that said, I just heard about this. I haven't tried it. I think we should try it. And most people, when they first hear about it, say, this seems ridiculous. This couldn't possibly work. That would be the worst way to work. So I thought, well, there's somebody I want to meet.
Okay.
So when I came here, I met him. And you should get him definitely on your podcast. He's just brilliant.
Yeah, cool.
Brilliant.
One more question before we end up. I know
yes, because we might run out of time.
Yeah, we might. But the last question is that now we will of course create then no meetings. But what will be the next big thing in the Agile community, you think, moving onwards?
Well, so not coming from me, I think I'm seeing a lot more of the idea of being able to quickly take an idea and deploy something for it. So we're seeing that all over the place now. So the idea that we no longer need to think about, do we need to set aside a year for this project? That's starting to really become a reality. 20 years ago when I started working for other people doing this stuff, delivering something every day was not common because we didn't have the mechanisms for doing it.
No.
And people would say, well, we don't want to get new software every day. It takes us hours or weeks to train our people and so on. I think we're getting that time now where it's a reality, and if you're not able to do it, you want to learn to do that. The things that people like Joshua Karievsky are sharing, what he calls modern Agile, which is really just taking everything we've learned in the last 20 years or 15 or whatever years and adding them to what we know about Agile. It's like the missing word from the Agile Manifesto really is feedback. I wish they would have just slipped that in somewhere because it's about the rapid feedback. And he's talking about some of these things, and there's others in the industry as well. There's a lot of bright people who are collaborating across companies. And I think that's another thing I'm seeing more of. So if I'm going to be part of it at all, I'm really glad to be brought along with it. But it won't originate with me. None of the things that I talk about originated with me. And I'm really pleased to see this rapid going from idea to useful product. I think that's now coming into its fullness. So that's not really helping. It's not answering what's next. It's just what I'm
It's no
observing
meetings
right now.
then that is next.
It's got to be no meeting.
Yeah, but I mean, also you're saying that the trend is that the time to get something out on the market will be even magnitudes shorter, sort of, and that the cooperation between organizations will increase tremendously.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that the competition becomes less where we're at, and the cooperation is more where we're at. That's my hope. And I'm seeing so much of that right now. At Hunter, we would invite people to come and visit us, anybody. So one of our earliest visitors came from Stockholm. Just come, see what we're doing, learn, share with us your ideas. And I like to see that. This idea of sharing ideas.
Yeah.
And that's why podcasts like yours, I think, is so valuable.
Yeah.
Because this is how we can share ideas across companies.
And it is also the attitude of many modern companies, like Spotify, for example, share a lot of ideas, and they don't mind that.
So maybe we need to go to San Diego then.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome to come, and if you get in touch with them, they will. The people now at Hunter still follow that tradition. Come and visit. They'd love to have you.
Cool. And
that's really
we should say big thank you to you, Woody.
Thank you very much. Can I make a plug for an advertisement?
Of course,
for sure.
I should have done.
Yeah.
It's probably too short of notice now, but on April 12th and 13th, we have the Mob Programming Conference in Boston.
Okay.
In the U.S. It's a little bit outside of Boston, but it's I don't know if this will be published before then.
It will be.
And anybody here in Sweden that wants to come, we already have 3 or 4 of our main. We call them moderators. They're like moderators or facilitators, but these are people who have 4 or 5 years experience doing it here in Sweden, and they're going to come and share their experiences there. We have other people from around the world, and we gather a very small gathering, maybe 100 people, very focused on just mob programming for 2 days.
Oh, that's great.
So you can get in touch with me. Follow me on Twitter or send me a tweet or LinkedIn or whatever. I'll get info to you.
And what's your name on Twitter?
So I'm Woody Zuill in Twitter.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to find me. I don't hide it all.
Good.
Yeah.
And that's also if people want to ask you to come and have lectures and so on.
Well, Chris, now I would love to come. Yeah, that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Yeah.
And I do hope to make it back to Sweden at least once this year. And I already have a number of people that want me to come to workshops, but I love to be as busy as possible.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, so to top it all off, my goal isn't to get more and more work doing mob programming workshops. My goal is that sometime soon, nobody will need a mob programming workshop because they'll all know what it is, and they'll all know how to do it, and they'll all know why they might want to try it, so that it'll be easy to say, yeah, let's try it.
But the problem is then you need to go for a new tour on the new meetings.
So I have to do the no meetings. But, then maybe no workshops and then no conference. I think at some point we won't be doing anything.
Except for useful...
but always podcasts.
Only direct value.
Thank you so much for bringing me here.
It
It was wonderful. I had a great time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Och där tackar vi Woody för att han var med då.
Det är ju sjukt roligt.
Verkligen helt otroligt. Och så går vi över på svenska igen.
Ja. Vi vill tacka Informator igen och passa på att upplysa om lite kurser.
Det ska vi göra. Och om man då går in återigen på agilpodden.se och klickar på informatorloggan så kommer man in i detta kursutbud.
Exakt.
Och där finns det då massor med olika kurser. Och vi är ju mest puffat för de agila kurserna egentligen. Men majoriteten av de personerna som jobbar inom IT jobbar ändå med någon form av kodutveckling. Och där finns ett fantastiskt kursutbud då. Om man tittar på, det finns ju då såklart Java, .NET. Det finns liksom både C och C++ om man vill in på den biten. Och så vidare. Gira-kurser finns också.
Precis. Och då typiskt är Gira till exempel är en endagskurs då, men de här programmeringskurserna är typiskt är de i 5 dagar och det finns ju verkligen olika nivåer, alltså från grundkurs till avancerat och så där. Man kan verkligen utbilda sig i programmering.
Och gör det för guds skull. Det är väl jättebra att få med sig bra kodkunskap från början.
Ja.
Och det är också bra det här när man försöker skapa fullt stack team liksom och skapa T-shaped och så vidare, att man utbildar då i, om man är backend tung, att man utbildar sig lite i fronten
och vice versa.
Exakt.
Och ta med även med testa då för allt i världen.
Ja, för allt i världen. Gör det.
Och så skriver ni Agilpodden när ni anmäler er också.
Ja, gör det. Och precis. Ja. Bra.
Ska säga var jag var någonstans igår?
Ja.
Jag var i Jönköping och pratade på Agila Jönköpings After Work där. Det var otroligt roligt. Jag var riktigt inspirerad. Jag pratade bland annat om servant leadership, om estimat pratade jag.
Passar just idag.
Det passar mycket bra just idag. Och jag pratade lite om agilt för de som inte är frälsta. Och sen så körde jag min kurs där i management by follow-up. Alltså i att det kanske inte är någon fördel med management by follow-up. I alla fall. Och vad jag skulle komma...
Ja, jag bara bryter in det. Jag skulle ju såklart varit med, men jag blev ju magsjuk då. Jag är från Jönköping, så därför var det extra så ut att missa i min hemstad då. Men det vi ska säga är också, det som är lite kul med det här upplägget är ju faktiskt att du hade förberett några ämnen. Men sen så börjar hela föreläsningen med att folk får preppa in egna ämnen.
Just det.
Och sen så får alla rösta. Och sen så blir det 3 stycken blixttal på en kvart styck ungefär.
Precis.
Så det gör liksom att det kan vara svårt för oss att förbereda, men å andra sidan så kan man anpassa då föreläsningen efter kundbehovet liksom.
Precis. Och det här agilt för ej frälsta, det var ju publikens alternativ. Det var ju som röstades in. Det var ju inte jag som kom med. Ja, roligt. Så om ni vill att vi ska komma och prata på något så kan ni höra av er.
Ja.
Agilpodden på Instagram, agilpodden@gmail.com.
Ja, och agilpodden.se som sagt kan ni också klicka in på om ni vill hitta till informator super då. Men vi tackar för idag.
Tack så jättemycket, tack för att ni lyssnar.
Verkligen.
Hej.